Hello, everyone, and very happy Friday. And we are super excited to welcome you all for our fourth webinar, Baby Steps to Big Adventures, as part of the series Newborn 101 Parent Learning Series. I am Rohit, and I am the co founder and president of Bujjify. With me, I have Rekha, who is the co founder and CEO of Bujjify. And today's speaker is none other than our superstar pediatric expert, Cathy from Playful Strides. So thank you. I just wanted to thank you everyone for joining our session. So let's dive in. So today's session, we are going to basically start off with a short introductions for both Bujjify and Playful Strides. And then Cathy is going to walk us through everything early development for your baby. And we are going to close off the session with a live Q&A. So if you have any questions already, or if you get any questions like along the way, please do post it in the comments section, and then we are going to get to the questions during our Q&A, and we'll try to answer to the best of our abilities. So again, thank you so much for joining, and so we'll dive in now. So who are we? So our company is called Bujjify, and I am the co-founder and president, and Rekha is the co-founder and CEO, and we happen to be husband and wife as well. So Bujjify is a child development and parent education company that helps parents to basically raise healthier and smarter children in today's world of information overload, toys overload, and basically a toy industry that's oversaturated with plastic. So how we do it? We have come up with something called Play Rigs. That's our products. So Play Rigs are toolkits created based on the research and expert advice, and they have the tools that are inspired by Montessori philosophy. And each play rig is tailored to a specific age or developmental stage of the baby, and it includes all the necessary essentials, right? Necessary tools and toys for the babies for that stage. And not just the tools and toys, it also comes with a play guide for each play rig, which gives you the bite-sized information for the parents to with the information that you must know what's happening with the baby at that stage, and what do you need to know, how to play with these toys, and also some common red flags that you should look out for. So that's Bujjify. And coming to the play rigs, so right now we have 6 play rigs from 0 to 12 months, starting from newborn, rollover, crawler, etc. And each play rig, like I mentioned, it focuses on a specific set of milestones for the baby. For example, newborns, when their vision is actually developing, they cannot see colors. They can see only high contrast black and whites. So that's why the newborn play rig has a lot of black and white accents. While the second one, the rollover play rig, at 3 to 4 months, so it's about time to give a lot of tummy time to the baby. So it has a lot of tools that are necessary to give tummy time to your baby. Similarly, crawler, so it has all the necessary tools and toys that will focus on their muscle development, their core muscles, their wrist development, etc. Similarly, like listener, play rig, builder, and solver. So we have up till 12 months right now, and of course we have plans to expand it to 24 months and beyond. So that's Bujjify. Do check us out at bujjify.ca. With that, I will hand it over to Cathy for her introduction.
So sure. So my name is Cathy O'Leary. I'm an occupational therapist with almost 30 years of experience in pediatrics. I run a company called Playful Strides Therapy in Halton, Ontario, and I provide our clinic provides occupational therapy and physiotherapy for children from 0 to 21. I'm here today to talk about the developmental process and things parents can do to support and things they might be doing to hinder a child's development. And I'm ready to move to the next slide. So, isn't development grand? If you ever watch an occupational therapist or physiotherapist look at your child who they're not treating, they will have a grin on their face. They're just really enjoying the developmental steps that your child is in the moment, and they see a lot of things that you may not see. Some of it you don't need to know about, but it's just from our experienced eyes, we look at children very differently. In this picture, there are two children. One is 4 months old and one is 2 months old. The chunky one is 2 months old. And they're just sitting at Christmas. They happen to be wearing the same outfit at Christmas, but their development is really different between the two of them. One child doesn't even know where her hands are, and the other one does. So it's really cool to watch a child develop their skills from head to toe, and to allow a child to be in that moment and learn all those skills in that point before rushing them forward to the next point. Can you flip the page? Thank you. So I wanted to explain what a motor milestone is, because all parents get asked these questions. So children travel on their own rate and in their own way through every motor skill they develop. And motor skills happen gross motor, so that's big body movements, to fine motor. And if they don't gather the gross motor skill, it impacts on their vision, their hearing, and their hands and how they use them. So a motor milestone is if they looked at the general population and said, hey, when does a child typically track with their eyes? And they'll tell you, typically by a month, the child is tracking consistently left to right and top to bottom. And that is the typical. If a child is born early, we actually start at where their 0 point would be. So if a child is born not at 40 weeks, but at 36 weeks, we call them almost like minus 1 month. So when they get to a month or 0, that would be when they're 1 month old. And when they get to 2 months, that's when their 1 month old is. So some children are on their own trajectory because they were born early. Some children are just really big kids, so it's harder for them to move, and they may move through their steps slower. And then there are children who don't have the same experiences as others. Maybe they have had some time in the hospital. Maybe they were really ill when they were little, maybe really colicky. So they may start their steps later and catch up in their steps. So we don't get really stuck on a child's development until they're about 2 to 4 months behind. So when we look at a red flag is typically when they are falling off the trajectory they were following, or when they're really falling behind their motor skills. So motor milestones are, first of all, a child will visually track. The second is they start to, by 2 months, they move from a very flexed posture to a more extended posture. By 8 weeks, children should be able to lift their head in tummy time. By the end of 4 months, they should be able to shift their body and roll back to belly, belly to back. By 6 months, they've stretched out their legs a lot, which you see in this picture, and they should be able to sit when propped. By 6.5 months, they should have their ability to sit. I'm so sorry, my light turned off. I'm going to try and turn it back on. There we go. They should be able to weight shift, so to be able to play without having their hands down. Around 7 months, they learn to rock on hands and knees. And by 8 months, they should be able to pivot from sitting to hands and knees, starting to crawl. By 9 to 11 months, children are starting to pull to stand using their arms. By about 11 months, a child might be standing independently. And by 12 months, they may be walking. Now, to be clear, the times for these have changed. When typically a child was sitting independently at 6 months, and that was the standard when they were in the 1970s and 80s, it's now between 6 and 8 months. When children were crawling, it used to be between 6 and 8 months. Now it's between 8 and 10 months. So things have shifted, and that's related to other things happening in our environment. But typically, if a child is not walking by 15 months, your doctor will be having a conversation with you, because by 15 months, they should be up on their feet. So that's the end of our motor milestones page. If you'd like to go to the next one. So the important thing to know is movement starts at the head and goes to the feet. So the first thing kids learn to do is lift their head, either forward or tuck their chin and look down, because really when you're born, the brain has an operating system of no information. And the first thing that happens is the brain gets information from what they see and what they hear. So they start to turn their head to what they hear. Then they start to learn to prop up with their arms. Then they learn to tuck their feet under, and they can sit independently, which is your second picture on the slide. And then they start to move between those movements. So they have rotation that starts around 8 months of age, and they learn to move from sitting to lying and lying to sitting. At 7 months, kids can do an awesome plank. They can be on their hands and their feet and just hold the plank, and they can hold it forever. And it's just fantastic to watch. And they're building their core stability in that point. But movement happens from your head to your toe. So asking a child at 2 months to stand isn't appropriate because they don't actually have toes ready yet. And that's how their neurological system primes itself in all mammals. Okay, our next slide. So our job as a parent or an adult who caregives for a child is to connect with them. And we want to connect with them in all environments and just enjoy the moment they're at and give them experiences in that environment. So these are just different pictures of children doing things at their age level. So our first one, you can see he's bringing his legs up in the nature scene. That's because he now has what's called a Landau response. And at about 4 to 5 months of age, children can do this, kick their feet out behind them. That's the beginning of getting their butt to kick their feet out. And you can see the hands aren't involved at all because he's probably 4.5 months old. The middle picture is probably the most important thing that we can do as parents. And it starts at birth when one of our famous OTs, Kim Barthel, calls it gleam and beam. The child gleams at you, you beam back, they gleam back. And that's how children are engaged in their environment as well as communication. And communication has its own milestones. And it's important that the child feels that they feel safe and connected to you, because then they will try things with you and check in with you and try things with you and check in with you. And that is part of us enjoying their experiences. The picture on the far right is actually a child doing rings. So a lot of programs have rings because kids love them. They spin, they can do a whole bunch of things with it, and they can practice it over and over again. So that's a child who's closer to a year. It can sit independently, can reach for 2 objects in his hands. And that child can play somewhat independently if there's an adult nearby that they can check in with. The picture on the bottom left is a little one crawling, and that's a beginner crawler, and I can just tell by the positioning of their hands. That's the therapist in me. But you can see in the background, there's a parent there watching them. So the child's crawling away and crawling back, because children try motor skills to move away from where they are and to come back to that safe spot. So this like a beginning of an attachment strategy that a child's using. I'm going to crawl away from you, mommy. Now I'm going to come back and get a cuddle from you, and I'm going to crawl away, and I'm going to come back. And that is why children move. They move when they can come back to a safe spot. But if a child crawls and you run away, and you crawl and they run away, they don't feel that same level of safety. Excuse me. I'm in a room with a light sensor. The next one is a child who's actually up on their feet too soon. So this child is stepping. You have a stepping reflex, and they're being held high in the air. So they're being pulled up by their arms, and they're taking steps, but they're not really. They're as one foot hits the ground, they're reflexively pulling their other foot up. And as that foot sort of hits the ground, they're reflexively putting their other foot up. But this child's not ready for standing or walking at this point. And the last picture is a child playing independently. And that would not be an under 12 month. That would be about a 2-year-old playing independently, using all those skills that they learned when they were little together, to pull their eyes together, to weight bear on one arm, to use their other hand. And we can just enjoy this development that is just fantastic from 0 months to 6 years. Could we go to the next page? So there's things that impact on a child's development and things that we think about. So one of the biggest thing is torticollis. And I think probably a lot of you have heard of this. It's when the head kind of tilts to the side, and that is now upright. So when we ask a child who's sitting like this all the time to lie down, they're lying down in this position. And when they're sitting in this position. So it might be tilted a bit to one side. And there's different reasons that children have torticollis. Sometimes they're just kind of really tight and small in the womb. So when they're born, they were kinked, so they're tight. The one side is tighter than the other. Some children during the birthing process may get wrenched a bit, so they're pulled to one side. A third reason is children who have significant reflux. This is not regular just spitting up. This is children that feel pain every time they swallow. So they are stretching, actually they go this way and they're stretching out their esophagus for better swallow. But if we don't address torticollis below a year, we get flathead on one side of the head. And the other thing is what you're seeing in the picture beside it, it affects kids' eyes. Because if this is upright, when I ask you to bring your head straight, the eyes go to the side. And it causes difficulty with learning to read and write, to ride a bike, to put on your clothes. And it can impact a child's life down the road. As you can see, one side of his shoulder is higher than the other, which puts him at higher risk of scoliosis. So if you have a child that does not hold their head in middle when you're sitting in front of them, they don't lie in middle with their head in the middle, and they're always to the side in all your pictures, that should be addressed by the healthcare team. Osteopaths see children like this. Physiotherapists and occupational therapists all can teach you some positional activities and stretching to support a child after they've been seen by their healthcare professional. Can we go to the next page? So if we've made sure posture's right and our child is developing, what we will see is children being able to do things as they get older. So the first thing we think about is if a child can use their hands separate from their trunk, so they can sit without their hands being held or having to hold on to things, they can dress themselves. This little one has decided to put on like 4 layers of clothes, but she is quite happy that she's learned this skill. She's about 18 months. If I don't gain the skill on my belly of pushing up and looking in front of myself, I struggle with getting my eyes to come together. And then reading is hard for me. So interest in books isn't there. And if the interest in books isn't there, it makes it hard for me to learn those skills I need to in school or before school. The third area is if I don't use my hands to play with my eyes together, if I'm always doing things to the side, or if I can only use one hand, it makes it hard to learn to write, to color, to print, to cut with scissors. So these foundational skills below a year will have an impact on their development when they're older. So we always address posture first, and then we make sure that they have a variety of experiences of movement. Can we go to the next slide? So there's different ways you can look at development. And one of the things that therapists have recognized since the Back to Sleep campaign that went out is the amount of container time that children have. So the first thing I would say is back to sleep is very important. It has really reduced the risk of sudden infant death syndrome. Unfortunately, they did beautiful posters that had back to sleep on one side and belly to play on the other. And in many cultures and in many countries, children are on the ground when they are not in parents' arms. In some cultures, the kids are in containers, so a bath seat, car seat, this is an up seat or a bumbo. They might be in a swing, in a jumping thing. For every container a child is in, you can take a month off their development. So if a child at 4 months is sitting in a bumbo, is being held or cradled in a car seat and a swing and is in an exerciser, they could be back at a 1-month-old level in their development because they're not getting the experiences they need. So the child in the up seat and the children sitting on the floor are the same age. So you can see that, and I would say one of the children on the floor is probably a preemie. But what you're seeing is the difference in their skills. One is still holding on in the upseat. He's holding on to manage really well. The other children have the ability to use their hands away from their body without it. Now, they are snapshots in time, and I don't see the picture of the little guy on the floor, but it is a good example between the two. If kids are on the floor, not the bed, on the floor, they will actually develop faster and have more quality of movement than if they're in containers. Children do not need to be sitting in a container all day. Could we go to the next slide? So the biggest thing we see is parents want their kids to walk. So important for families to see children walking. And one of the things we see parents doing is getting them to stand, because they look at their infant and go, look, at 1 month, he can stand. Isn't this great? So now I should make him walk. So at 2 months, you can tip a child slightly forward and they'll pick up their feet and walk. It's called a stepping reflex. It goes away by 3 months. This is a standing reflex. So if this child is standing here and you hold them around their rib cage, they'll stand for a good 4 seconds and then they'll collapse, because they actually don't know where their feet are. It's just a reflex. And so what happens if we get kids walking too early? They're toe walkers. And toe walkers, it's because we've changed the position of how their body works. And toe walkers are a larger and larger number of kids that we see who have no other developmental challenge but toe walking. And toe walking really impacts. You can't walk backwards if you're a toe walker. You can't walk sideways if you're a toe walker. You can't run effectively if you're a toe walker. So toe walking is developmentally appropriate to children learning to walk between 11 and 14 months. Beyond 14 months, we really don't want kids toe walking, unless they're in a ballet class. Then they can toe walk. So one of the reasons kids toe walk is that parents get them on their feet too soon, because we really want our kids to develop. The other reason is that they're in the bouncy toys. So Exercsaucer or Jolly Jumper, which encourages that extension pattern of movement, which these kids are already sort of moving towards, and it just kind of reinforces this. So when we do something over and over, our brain builds a bigger and bigger motor pathway in that way, and it doesn't build it in a balanced way against gravity. So both the little guy in the Exercaucer and the Jolly Jumper are being held up against gravity that they wouldn't usually do. So Jolly Jumpers have been around forever, and they're great for short periods of time in a day, but a child shouldn't be in them for more than 20 minutes. The same with an Exercaucer. An Exercaucer gives you a break when you have to get things done. It keeps your child happy. But if a child is in an Exercaucer, I would recommend that either you put something under their feet so they can't be on their toes, or drop it really low so they can sit and stand in it, but they cannot bounce in it. So they would have to actually plant both their feet, push themselves to standing, and then stand back and then sit back down. I'm waiting for my light to turn on. There we go. Okay. So we don't want to focus too early on walking, but it is okay for kids to be on their feet. It's just not okay to force children to be on their feet. Okay. So our next slide is about crawling. This is an occupational therapy. This is near and dear to our heart, because as children did back to sleep and didn't do belly to play, because that was on the other side of the poster, we all of a sudden had an increase in number of kids who had fine motor tremors. And significant numbers, a 10% increase in 2 years of children being referred in the US to it, to the point that the American Academy of Pediatric said, hey, we should just get rid of crawling because none of these kids are crawling. But we were seeing the impact. And so if you can get your child and let them enjoy crawling, or encourage crawling through different activities like going through a tunnel or climbing upstairs or that are appropriate, or going up a wedge and down a wedge, all those sort of things will help the brain work together. So from an OT's point of view, an occupational therapist's point of view, one of the main reasons we see children is for handwriting and printing issues. That's what they get referred in school. But if you look at your hand, it actually has arches in it. It has an arch this way. We call it the bye-bye arch. It has one this way. You can feel the middle part. And the third arch it has is a cup like this. So those arches develop by crawling. And we put things in our hand and we crawl with them in our hands, and we build our shoulders and we make them strong. And it takes our shoulder blades and it mashes them against our rib cage. So our rib cage and shoulders work together so our hands are free to move. And it helps us build our spinal curves that come in place, that stabilize our body and take weight through it. And it makes the left side of the body and the right side of the body work together. And it makes our eyes work together in scanning something close and scanning something far. and it gets our hips ready for walking. And so all those pieces are required for effective walking, writing, reading, bike riding, running. All those pieces come from just crawling. So the easiest thing you can do with a child is help them crawl just by encouraging them to do so. And that's the last slide I have on just developing and enjoying your child where they are. Do you guys have any questions, Rohit, that are there?
So I have one that yeah, we can talk about. And then in the meantime, like viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. We will get to them. So my question is about red flags, right? So within the first year, what are the major red flags that parents need to look for, and how can they identify something as a red flag, and when is it the right time to talk to their doctor about it?
That's fantastic. Okay, so the first thing is you can track your own child's development, but please don't do it daily. This should be, every couple months. So there's a couple different ones. Your doctor will have something called an ages and stages questionnaire that asks you questions at different stages, and that's how your doctor tracks it. In Ontario, at 18 months, you get a big visit. It's billed differently, so they get a big visit to do this. If your child is followed by an ICU follow-up, so if your child was in a neonatal intensive care unit, you're followed till 2, and they will see them at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, and they will do an ages and stages. So you can get hold of an ages and stages questionnaire. I usually refer families to the Center for Disease Control Red Flags because it's an app and you can put it on your phone. So typically, if a child by 4 months isn't tracking, we worry because that's 2 months beyond where they should be. If by 6 months they're not rolling, if by 8 months they're not sitting, and and then there's this big leap. Okay, if by 12 months they're not really moving, they're kind of staying still, I encourage them to talk to their doctor and to see someone about vision, because vision will be an issue. Why kids don't move. So if I can't see anything beyond my hands because I'm nearsighted, I don't explore beyond there because it's scary. If by 15 months a child's not standing independently, and by 18 months if they're not walking, those are sort of the guidelines. But if you have a concern, take a video and show it to your doctor. Like, this is what we're doing. If you're seeing your child's not rolling, I know I have a story for this. My sister called me when my first nephew was born. He was 4 months old, and she said, he's 4 months old. Why didn't you tell me he was delayed? I said, what do you mean? She goes, he's not rolling. So 4 months is the beginning of that. And she's a new mom, but she also works in healthcare, so she was anxious. And I sleepily, because it was 10 at night, I said, well, you have to put him down. It was the first child. They'd never put him down. And she says, but he cries. And I said, he'll cry and roll over. So she called me back a half an hour later and said, he crawled, he cried, he rolled over. So he was, so sometimes it's just experiences. So if you see your child at 4 months isn't rolling, put them on the ground and put one of their toys, like the play rings we use here. We put them to the side so they'll roll to them, or we'll put it over top of their head. So if this is the object and I have a child here, I'm going to move it from one side to the other as they track it. And as I get to about here, their body is rolling with me. If a child's dead flat, they're not ready to roll, and that they usually need more belly time. If a child is not sitting, I would say you need to question whether they're in a lot of containers where they're not practicing sitting independently. So I think you saw the picture with the ring around the child. That was because she was never getting to practice sitting independently because it was a hardwood floor. So we put an inner tube ring around her. So if she fell backwards, she didn't whack her head. And again, it was a firstborn child. So about the third or fourth, you hear it's different. But the first child, they're contained a little bit more. We use a lot of the nursing pillows behind children as a place for them to land. And it's important that we don't pad them, because when you put a pad on a child, they don't realize they need to tuck their chin and prevent their head from hitting. So if a child is sitting and we're patting them, they're just going to whack their head when it's not there. So we don't want to overprotect a child unless it's an environment where they need that protection. For children that are not crawling, a lot of the times it's they haven't had belly time. And if they've had belly times, they've been encouraged to be upright. So they haven't had a practice of it. So when I see children here, even if they have chewing issues and I ask about their crawling, a lot of times the parents will say, oh yeah, they crawled for a day or two and then they were up on their feet. And that lack of crawling is impacting on their chewing. So we get them back to crawling. And within 2 weeks, the tongue movements are much better. So they're all interconnected.
Got it.
Same for walking. Don't let a child walk as much as they can on their own.
Yeah. And about your answer about the padding, right? So too much padding into the baby. Actually, I think I saw a product which is almost like a pillow with backpack handles. So they just wear it like a backpack, do whatever they do, and then they fall it on a pillow.
Right.
So
I've seen that too, and I'm thinking, okay, are we over? When are we going to let the body do its job, right? So there are situations where we do put helmets on children or padding, and that would be a child who has a seizure disorder or a child who has very poor balance because of vision or whatever. We might pad them because they're not going to be able to catch themselves. And they're going to fall multiple times a day, and we want them to practice. But again, we might put them on a pad and let them fall and bang their head, but they're going to bang it on something soft.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a very great answer, Cathy. Even like Rekha and I, we have been into this, like doing these webinars and listening to you and reading multiple documents while doing our product channel. And every time like you come up with an answer, we keep learning something new because it's a science. It's so much to it, right? I mean, like no parent can, unless they are a child development specialist of some sort. It's not easy for parents to like care for a newborn and learn all these things. So,
no, and I would say even if you work in healthcare or you work in child development, your own child makes you just a parent. And so if I have a parent who's an OT or a PT or whatever, I say to them, you're going to understand technical terms, but that is all you're going to understand.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next question by Karima. Hi, Karima. So the question is, can you send me the link? Okay, so not a question really, but Cathy, yeah, if you can.
Sure. Let me see if I can pull it up while I'm talking to you. But if you go to cdc.ca, usually just put red flags in, it comes up. But let me just see if I can pull it up while I'm talking to you.
Yep.
Red flags. It's American. It's not Canada. So it's cdc.org because it's a Canadian. Yeah. And then it's going to be red flags.
Got it.
If I can't find it, I will send it to you.
Oh. Sure. Yeah. And Karima, I'll send it to you after the call. Okay. One more question by Rekha. So yeah, it's about army crawling. Some kids do army crawling instead of regular crawling and then go to standing position. Would there be any impacts in this case?
So this is really interesting. So the Americans use the term crawling as we call commando crawling, and we actually use creeping which is a British term in between. So so we call crawling commando crawling. Okay, so what typically in therapy we'll talk about it. So children will go from commando crawling, which is a step beyond rolling. So they're just pulling with their arms, and then they'll pop themselves up into crawling. So even if they don't seem like they're there long, they're still doing it because they should be popping up into what we call belly off the ground crawling, creeping. And the reason they're doing that step is important is because that's when they're taking the full weight on their arms and not just on their shoulders. So it's shoulders first, then arms. Some children skip the belly down crawling and they only do the belly up crawling. But those kids tend to be rollers. So yes, some kids may look like they don't do a lot of it, but there has to be a movement from commando crawling to popping up to get to standing. So that they're getting that movement there too. But a lot of the kids who commando crawl and don't crawl have fine motor issues.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Cathy. And I think that's...
Can I add an idea here? Okay, so a lot of kids will do what's called the butt scooch. So they will either put both feet down and so they're sitting in a ring or diamond position, and they bring their heels to their groin, heels to the groin, and that's how they scoot around. or they use one leg up, one leg down, and they scooch. Both of those are signs of children having difficulty. And it looks really cute and the kids can move, but it's actually a sign that they can't use the both sides of their body together. So if you see that, encourage those children to actually go to hands to knees, or if I'm sitting beside a child who's scooching, I may just hold one leg and they will scooch over the leg and go into crawling, or they might go down on their belly. And so if you're seeing those sort of things, a quick visit with a healthcare professional can usually in one session resolve those sort of issues. It doesn't take long, but it's a good thing if a child's at risk to kind of address it first and not later. And I do have that contact for you, but I will send it to you. I think that's better.
Perfect. Yeah, that'll help.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are all the questions we have. So thank you everyone for joining today on another amazing session today. And thanks, Cathy. Thanks for your time and sharing your wisdom with us. So like I said, right, so every time we meet with you, we speak with you, we learn so much more. So hopefully it is helping other parents too to learn about their journey and all that. But yeah, thank you so much and have a happy Friday, everyone. So we are going to end the session now. Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to everyone too. Thanks.